Adding a subwoofer to your home theater or stereo system can completely transform the way you experience sound. When it's set up correctly, a good subwoofer doesn't just add boom. It brings depth, texture, and realism to everything from explosions in action movies to the subtle low-end details in music. But even the best subwoofers can sound underwhelming if they're not installed properly. The reality is, most people make at least one major mistake when setting up their subwoofer. Well, the good news here is that every one of these issues can be fixed with just a little bit of knowledge and a few simple adjustments. Now, one of the most common issues we see is placing the subwoofer in the wrong spot. It's easy to assume that a sub can just go anywhere, but low-frequency sound waves interact with your room more than any other part of the audio spectrum. That means the location of your subwoofer makes a massive difference here. If you've ever played a song with some really deep bass and then you've walked around the room, you've probably noticed that bass gets louder in some places and then it almost disappears in other places. That's because your walls, floors, and ceiling are reflecting the sound and creating peaks and nulls, which are spots where certain bass frequencies either build up or cancel out. A lot of people place their sub wherever it fits best or where it just looks clean, like tucked behind a couch or inside a cabinet, but that usually leads to weak or some uneven bass. To improve it, a great place to start is along the front wall of your room, ideally in one of the front corners. This spot typically delivers the most powerful bass by energizing the room more efficiently. If you can, pull the subwoofer out a few inches from the wall or the corner to reduce some extreme peaks. Now, for even better placement, you should try what's called the subwoofer crawl. Put your subwoofer temporarily in the main listening seat, then play a track with some deep, steady bass. Crawl around the room's perimeter, listening for the spot where the bass sounds the fullest and most balanced. That's a strong candidate for the final placement of your sub. Now move the sub there and see how it performs. Now, even with good placement though, your seating position can have a big impact on how the bass sounds. Sitting in the wrong spot can make the bass sound weak or overly boomy, no matter how well that sub is set up. Two of the worst places to sit are either dead center in the room or pressed up against the back wall. The center often falls into a standing wave null where bass cancels out. The back wall typically exaggerates bass buildup, making everything sound a little bit bloated. Now, if your seats are adjustable, you should try moving them to about 2/3 of the way from the front wall toward the back wall. This tends to avoid the worst standing wave issues, and if you're starting from scratch, you can even use our free home theater design tool at audioadvice.com, which will help you figure out where your seats and speakers should go based on your room's dimensions and does all the math and calculations for you right inside the tool. Now, another issue we see is relying too much on room correction software. Systems like Odyssey, Dirac, Anthem Room Correction are incredibly useful, but they're not a cure-all. If your sub is in a bad spot to begin with, digital correction can only do so much. Room correction software is great for reducing loud bass peaks by cutting them down, but it can't fix dips. Those are physical cancellations caused by the room itself. Adding more power doesn't help when the sound waves are literally canceling each other out. The fix here is to treat the room correction as the finishing touch, not the starting point. First, place your subwoofer as best you can, and then run your system's calibration. If your sub has built-in EQ with a mic or an app, follow the instructions to complete that step. Just remember, it can't compensate for a poor location. Now, another big mistake is cranking the subwoofer's volume way too high and setting the crossover incorrectly. A lot of people chase that deep rumble by turning up the volume too far, but what you often end up with is this muddy, overwhelming bass that drowns out the rest of your audio. You should start with the volume knob on the sub around the 12 o'clock position. Then use your receiver's built-in speaker calibration tool or even an SPL meter app on your phone to match the sub's level to the rest of your speakers. A good target is around 75 decibels at your main seat. For the crossover, 80 Hz is a really good starting point. That means sounds below 80 Hz go to your subwoofer while everything else stays with your main speakers. If you have small bookshelf speakers, you could try raising it a bit, or if you have large towers, you might actually want to lower it a little bit. But what you're aiming for here is a smooth handoff where the sub and speakers work together seamlessly. If the crossover is too low, your main speakers might struggle with the deeper tones, leaving things sounding a little bit thin. But if it's too high, you'll get too much overlap, which can make the bass feel bloated quiet or unfocused. To really dial it in, play some music or movie scenes that you know really well, something with really clear low-end energy. Then adjust the crossover up and down in really small steps and listen to it. The right setting should make the bass feel natural, tight, and even without drawing attention to the sub itself. Now, one more quick but important note here is make sure your system isn't applying two crossovers at the same time. In most setups, you'll probably want to use your AV receiver's crossover settings and disable the subwoofer's internal crossover. That will prevent double filtering, which can muddy the sound. If you're unsure which one to use, you can always reach out to our experts that can help look at your specific setup to help you decide which crossover setting to use. Now, if you're working with a really large room or if you have lots of seats, using just one subwoofer might not cut it. Even with good placement, one sub can cause uneven bass where it sounds great in one seat and weak or bloated in another. Adding a second subwoofer can make a huge difference here. It spreads the bass way more evenly across the room and takes some of the load off of each sub, resulting in tighter, cleaner sound overall. Now, if your receiver or processor supports dual subs, try placing them in opposite corners of the room or along the front wall near each side. If you only have one subwoofer output, you can also use a Y cable to send the same signal to both subs and use their volume knobs to balance things out too. But with two subs, most people notice a really big improvement in bass consistency and dynamics. And if you want to go even further, using 4 subs, one in each corner, can offer near perfect bass uniformity. That's usually reserved for dedicated home theaters or enthusiasts with the space, but it's really worth mentioning and it makes it sound just incredible. Now, if you want to add multiple subwoofers, it helps to have room correction software that can calibrate each one individually. Anthem Room Correction and Dirac are two excellent options that both have that. Now, before we wrap things up, there's one more step that causes a really big mistake here: calibration and phase matching. After placement, you'll want to make sure your sub is time aligned with your main speakers. Digital processing, including EQ, room correction, or wireless signals, can introduce a slight delay sometimes, often around 10 milliseconds. That's like adding an extra 10 feet between your sub and your seat. Now, you can compensate for that by playing a test tone at your crossover frequency and slowly increasing the subwoofer's distance setting in your receiver. The loudest point on your SPL meter is when the sub and the speakers are in sync. Some receivers will do this for you during the auto calibration process, especially if they include phase alignment. But it's still worth checking manually if you want to get the best result. Now, at the end of the day, whether you're running a single sub in one small room or building out a full theater with multiple subwoofers, all of these tips can help you get dramatically better sound in every single seat. And if you want to go even deeper, which we do recommend, we've put together an entire library filled with setup guides for subwoofer calibration, subwoofer placement, surround speaker setup, and even acoustic treatment. Now, to make your setup even easier, you should also check out that home theater design tool that's free at audioadvice.com. You can just enter in all your room dimensions and it'll actually place your speakers in the ideal placement. It'll show you your screen size and seating layout, all based on your space. Whether you're starting from scratch or refining an existing system, it's one of the best resources available for building a home theater that looks and sounds amazing. Now, if you have more questions about subwoofers, check all the links down below where we go way more in depth on this topic, or you can also reach out to our experts at audioadvice.com or stop by one of our award-winning showrooms. We'd be happy to help you out. If this video was helpful to you in any way, please help support us by giving it a thumbs up, hitting that subscribe button, and turning on the notifications so you never miss out on any of our latest content. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.